It's outrageous. And like, think of all the taxes that we're paying, right? You got federal income tax, provincial income tax, federal sales tax, provincial sales tax, federal gas tax, provincial gas tax, carbon taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes, federal business taxes, provincial business taxes, capital gains taxes, alcohol taxes. You got import tariffs, which are just import taxes. So, you name it, they're taxing it.
This is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation podcast, where we are fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. I'm Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joined by two of my good friends, Franco Terrazzano, who is holding down the fort, stationed in Mordor, also known as the capital. I think it's going to be the Hunger Games pretty soon here, man, maybe in the fall. And Nicolas Gagnon, he is in La Belle Provence. He is our Quebec director. Now, we love Nick for many reasons. But one of the reasons that I like talking to Quebec, especially somebody who wants smaller government and more freedom, is that Alberta can just copy off their homework. It's kind of the smart thing to do if you want to have more autonomy. All right, let's get into this. Franco, Nicholas, both of us know every year, like the Fraser Institute does great work. One of the main things they do that I really appreciate is when they come out with this horrifying pie chart every year and they show us just how much we are truly being screwed by various levels of government, i.e. how much tax we're paying compared to other stuff like, food and a roof over your head, that sort of thing. Franco, did you want to take this one away? Where was the Fraser Institute's report this year? What percentage is coming off of our incomes in various forms of taxation?
Yeah, when you look at all the different taxes that you pay to all the different levels of government, the average family is spending more than 42% of their budget on taxes. More than 42%. Gross. That's almost half, right? Like, essentially take your family's paycheck, rip it in half, because that half is the tax man's. Okay. And like, look, this report, I love and I hate reading it at the same time, right? Because it just puts it into stark contrast. Almost half of your family's budget, poof, gone to the tax man. Now, think about it this way. The average family spends 42% of its budget on taxes and about 36% on food, clothing, and housing combined.
Wow.
Combined. Okay,
wow.
So a Canadian family is spending more on taxes than what they're spending on the other necessities of life combined: food, clothing, and housing. It's gross, right? Like, your biggest cost isn't your housing, isn't your clothes, isn't the food you put on your table. Your biggest expense is paying for the government.
That's really mind-blowing, especially today, because most of us know, who don't live in the boonies, that houses cost an arm and a leg. They're outrageous. Now, my understanding is this is an average, so this will continue to include maybe some older people who have paid off their houses a long time ago, but it's also including younger people who've gotten into the housing market like now, who are paying through the nose. And the fact that this average is out still, that they're still paying more in taxes than we are in food, housing, is crazy. Nicholas, what was your response to this? Like, every year I kind of read the report, and same as Franco, it's just kind of a love-hate relationship.
Well, actually, my reaction was also to realize that nothing has really changed over the last years. There's nothing that has been really done by any government, except a few, maybe like Alberta. There was also a small tax cut in Quebec also like a few years ago. But overall, if we just exclude the last tax cut from the federal government that happened on July 1st, where we had this small gift of a half a point of percentage on the first tax bracket, nothing has really changed overall. The tax burden of all Canadians have just massively increased. And we just see that the policies that are being pushed by the federal government in every directions are not making life easier for anyone. So yes, to see that we're sending almost half of our money in taxes, and yet the quality of the services that we receive from the government is not really increasing. We just see the results that are not less and less there and in the end, taxpayers are just being squeezed overall. And that's just a very sad thing. And also, I just realized that the Institute Fraser released also another study where they show the debt per citizen or by province. And I realized that there's 3 provinces that are doing very bad in terms of debt per taxpayer. In this case, we have Newfoundland, which is sadly on the top of it, with I think $68,000 per citizen. That is costing, or at least that is representing in terms of debt. So federally and provincially, you have Quebec in second position, and the Ontario government in third position, just very close. So not only we're paying more debt, we're paying more taxes, but we're more and more in debt as well.
We should get Nick on the show more often, Franco, because I just love the way he said the Institute of Fraser. It just is wonderful.
Well, okay. Nick, you bring up a really good point, because not only has the tax burden just gone to like crazy proportions, which is like nuts, that we're anywhere close to 50% of your money is going to governments. Like, what are they doing? They don't deserve that. Like, are you serious? No, they didn't work half your hours. Like, come on. But like, to your point, Nicholas, and I think it's a great point, is that, yeah, taxes have gone up dramatically, and yet government debt bills are still going up. Right. And that just goes to show how crazy out of control spending these politicians, what kind of spending train these politicians have been on. Now, folks, like, when we say from this Fraser Institute report that the average family is spending 42% plus of their budget in taxes, let's look at the growth in that outrageous tax bill over the decades. Okay, let's take a look at that outrageous tax bill growth. So the average tax bill has increased by more than 2,700% since 1961. More than 2,000% increase in the average tax bill. Okay, if you look at the consumer price index, right, a broad category to explain inflation. Well, CPI, consumer prices, have increased by a little over 900% over that time. So the tax bill went up 2,700% since 1961, whereas consumer prices went up 925%. So the tax bill is even going up way higher than inflation. And like, think about it this way. The average family pays about 42% of its income in taxes now to all levels of government versus 34% in 1961. So
that is, oh my God.
It's outrageous. And like, think of all the taxes that we're paying, right? You got federal income tax, provincial income tax, federal sales tax, provincial sales tax, federal gas tax, provincial gas tax, carbon taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes, federal business taxes, provincial business taxes, capital gains taxes, alcohol taxes. You got import tariffs, which are just import taxes. So, you name it, they're taxing it.
Electronics taxes. They have all these different little boutique taxes they tack onto specific items too. Hotel taxes. Like, every single time you turn around, we like to joke, don't let the government know you need oxygen, because they're going to bloody well tax it soon. And this is the thing, and it really makes me mad. I didn't realize it was in the thousands of percentages since the 60s. I knew it had gone up crazy, but I didn't realize it was in the thousands. That's just disgusting. I'll put it this way. A gentleman who was listening to us on the radio years ago had messaged me this, and I can't remember his name, so I'm sorry. He said, don't think of it as half your income. Imagine what you get paid. Say you're on salary and you're paid every 2 weeks, like most people, okay? Imagine what arrives in your bank account when you're on payday. Double it. Double it. What could you do if that paycheck of yours that you earned, you worked for, not the flippin' government, if you earned it, imagine if it were doubled. Like, consistently. What could you do with that money? Could you afford more nutritious food? Could you get that gym membership you've been meaning to get, but you've been denying yourself? Could you save up for a house? Could you pay off some of your debt? Could you afford to put your kid in a better school or get them better clothes? Like, it is mind-blowing what you would be able to do for yourself and your family to better your life if your income that you worked for were doubled. That is how much various levels of government are taking from you. And I'm going to riff off both your points here. What are you getting for that money? Are your government services like gold plated? Are they astonishingly good?
Well, I mean, I was just in the hospital. A couple Saturday nights ago. There was a little sports injury, not myself, but we were in the hospital. Eight and a half hours.
Insane. You hear this all the time, Frank.
All the time. And like, I've been in the hospital many times for like 8 hours waiting to get an x-ray. Many times.
There are people who have life-threatening situations that are sitting there for hours and hours at a time.
Yeah.
There are horror stories that I covered when I was a journalist of literally people dying because they did not get proper care. And I'm going to harp on this. I don't care. We were told like decades ago that access to a wait list is not access to health care. We were told this ages ago, but the government just keeps getting bigger and bigger and more bloated, and we have more and more middle management and worse services on the ground. Even look, let's not beat up on the feds right now. Look at your local city government. Look at how much your property taxes have gone up over the last 30 years. Look around your streets. Are they cleaner, safer, and in better repair than they were 3 decades ago? I doubt it.
Yeah.
I seriously doubt it.
It's almost like the bigger government gets, the worse all these services get.
I was going to just exactly zero in on that, Franco, and feel free to jump in here, Nick, because I think this is kind of the elephant in the room that few people want to talk about, because then they start talking about cuts, and then you wind up with, the local, like, Ottawa reporters just freaking out because bureaucrats might actually lose their jobs in Ottawa, as if Ottawa is some make work project for people. It's not, okay? Spoiler alert, it's just meant to pass law, okay? Franco, jump in on this. Is the answer, first things first, smaller government?
Yes.
Like, reduce that sucker and then
Yes.
work on it. Okay.
You know what? I am so glad that the government doesn't run grocery stores.
Oh.
Imagine how bad that would be. Like, let's be thankful. So, like, sometimes I hear these stories or like these comments about healthcare, and it's like, well, aren't you happy we have good government healthcare? And I'm like, first of all, we don't have good healthcare. Like, just compare Canada with so many other industrialized countries, and it's pretty obvious. But it's like, if you really care about healthcare, then it's like a good reason to have more options outside of the government, right? Like, we all need to eat, and thank goodness government isn't running grocery stores.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the wait times? Yeah.
Ask anyone who lived on the other side of the Iron Curtain. I had a friend of mine who grew up mostly in Russia, also in Estonia during the Soviet Union. And I'm not joking, the government ran the grocery stores. That's literally what they were doing. It was insane. He said the only thing that he ever had access to were a couple of loaves of bread, pickles, and onions. And this was in an industrialized city. He was not living out in the country. All of the women in his area had to take an 8-hour-long trade ride into St. Petersburg to go get meat. And even then, they had to make sure it was sausage that was full of salt that they wouldn't have to refrigerate. This is in the late 80s. This is not something that was happening in the 1950s or the 40s. So yeah, people who say, oh, we should nationalize and have the government run the grocery store, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Or housing. Which is a hot topic right now. Like, no, get out of the way. Like, are you serious? Like, especially when it comes to housing, all the different regulations and taxes, like, that is the problem. That is the reason we can't get more homes built to actually lower housing prices. And, like, just to tie this all the way back in, because we're talking about this massive explosion in taxes. Nicholas brings up a great point about how debt is still going up, even though taxes are going up. What I always like to say is this, okay? So the cost of the federal bureaucracy was about $40 billion in 2016. It now costs about $70 billion. That is a 70% increase in the cost of the federal bureaucracy. And I say, like, this is the most important question that you got to ask yourself. Are you getting anywhere close to 70% better services from the federal bureaucracy? I think for all of the audience and listeners who are tuning in right now, unless you're on the government payroll, the answer to that question is a big fat no.
Exactly. Okay. Go ahead, Nick.
If there's something I may add on top of that is that there's not just the cost of the services or the cost of the taxes that has increased over time. The cost of the debt itself has really increased massively right now. I think that the figure that we always bring up is the $54 billion mark. The fact that we pay up to $1 billion a week in interest on the debt itself, that has almost, if not completely, doubled over the last 10 years. And this is really cutting us from a good margin of maneuver, or what would be the proper expression in English, a leeway, where that money could be better used. Actually, we keep saying that we need more money for healthcare, we need more money for this and for that, for new infrastructure. Obviously, every time that the government is trying to handle those things, it never really ends up well. We always see overcost, we always see mismanagement. But if only there was enough resources that was oriented properly, maybe we would not be talking about all of those bad services that we have with healthcare services. When Franco mentioned that he waited 8 to 9 hours at the hospital, I almost laughed, not because it's funny, not at all, because that's a reality of so many Canadians. But to be honest, 8 to 9 hours in Quebec, you're lucky. So that tells you about what's the real state of our current social programs throughout the entire country, and the fact that we're paying so much on the debt. debt is really cutting us from that, from proper investment money that should be going in the right direction. Taxpayers want to have at least proper healthcare services, proper roads, and maybe also a standing army to defend the country in this time, and like with the whole thing that we know about the context of sovereignty and all that. So all that being said, why is that so much money is being wasted, and why are the politicians are not doing anything at all? And when they're trying to do some cleanup, like Carney is apparently trying to do right now, you have the unions, the public sector unions, they're raising up and they're trying to make sure that no cleanup, no cuts are being made whatsoever. So they just want the status quo to stay as it is, which is completely unacceptable.
What Nicholas just said there is super important. I'm going to get back to you in a second, Franco, about the government unions. I just wanted to stress what Nicholas pointed out. He's talking about just the interest that we taxpayers pay on the federal debt. So right now, the federal debt is more than $1.2 trillion with a T. You would actually have to wait 30,000 years if you started counting right now. It would take you 30,000 years to count to 1 trillion. He's pointing out that the interest we pay on the debt is 1 billion a week. Billion with a B. It takes about $1 billion to build a brand new hospital. So here's a visualization for you folks, for taxpayers listening. Imagine that it was our custom every week on Saturday night, instead of watching hockey, we all gather around in Canada and we're opening a brand new hospital. Nobody's in it yet, but it's all built. It's shiny, new paint, new chrome. We're all about ready to go in. Burn it down. Burn it every single Saturday night. That's what we're doing with our money when it comes to the interest on the debt. We're burning a new hospital every single week. Franco, this is where push comes to shove, because I've seen this movie before. Okay, I remember when Prime Minister Stephen Harper said, could you guys please find like 8% savings in each ministry? And it was, you'd think it was kingdom come, okay? Like the big black cloud was moving in. What is the temperature right now in Ottawa as the level of freakout goes when we're seeing mainstream media headlines saying that they could be cutting, I think it was 60,000 jobs. I use that term loosely because it could be just kind of equivalencies and retirements and stuff. But 60,000 is the number that I lately saw. Do you think this is going to happen? And how much fight is the union putting up right now?
Okay, so that $60,000 number, that 60,000, number of bureaucrats who might get fired, essentially, that's not a government figure. Right, okay. The government, that's not from the government at all.
Okay, got my hopes up for a second.
Yeah, no. That's just like a report from a think tank, let's say on the other side, who's just trying to drum up fear and fearmonger. Look, if the government was going to say like they're going to cut 60,000 bureaucrats, I would say that's a good start. Mm-hmm. Because the government just added 99,000 bureaucrats in a decade. Okay, so like first of all, that's not the government. Those aren't government numbers. That's just a report from a think tank trying to drum up fear. And that's kind of where the mood and the temperature is right now in Ottawa. Like nobody's going full out crazy yet, right? They're not talking about strikes or anything like that yet. But that's because it's still early days in this government. But you can bet that the union bosses are already starting to fearmonger, right? We've talked about Carney doing the spending review a couple times on the show now. And you had some of the government union bosses running around playing Chicken Little, yelling the sky's going to fall if those savings happen, right? One union called it a draconian rollback. A spending review. A bunch of the other unions are saying they're going to fight back, blah, 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 vital services. So the temperature, I would say it's simmering, right? We haven't seen it really come to a boil just yet, but there is going to be a fight. Like if the Carney government actually does the right thing and starts to cut bureaucrats, it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a big one. And that's why we need people listening to the show, our supporters of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, to, join the fight, get off the bench and actually tell the politicians, tell the members of parliament, yeah, us ordinary Canadians want the government to cut the number of bureaucrats because this is unsustainable, it's unaffordable, and quite frankly, it's not fair that ordinary Canadian taxpayers are paying so much to fund Ottawa's bloated bureaucracy.
Amen. And just to encourage people on two sides of this. One, if you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, those people have jobs, et cetera, don't think of it like that, okay? Remember that thing we told you about your paycheck. Imagine your paycheck being otherwise doubled if it weren't for the level of taxation that we're seeing from 3 various levels of government, okay? That is your money, and they are taking it. Now envision what they're doing with that money. Like, I would just, for argument's sake, say I shelved my Thomas Sowell, Ayn Rand, view on things, that I want smaller government, like super, super, super small government. Okay. Imagine if the world were like the 1955 Back to the Future, everything's manicured, everything's clean, everybody has a house they can afford, lots of food in the fridge. Even then, you'd start to wonder, why do we need government to do this if government were providing all of it? But that's not what we have. That is the opposite of what we have. 50% of Canadians are within $200 every month of not being able to pay the minimum amount on their bills, meaning keeping the lights on, stopping your car from being repossessed, making rent, buying enough food so you don't need to go to a food bank. 50% are within $200 of insolvency. That has been steady now for about like a year and a half, 2 years. That is crazy. And with all these folks who are fighting to afford basics, folks, Franco's right. You have to get off the bench. And here's some encouragement that it'll actually work. Because I can hear people right now saying, oh man, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm super strapped right now. Politicians always ignore me. Remember the carbon tax? Remember how like 3 years ago, us bringing up the carbon tax was like climate change denialism and you're not allowed to talk about it. And if you went on a road trip with your family, you wanted the planet to burn. Remember all that stuff? That was coming from the federal Liberal government. The federal Liberal government is now taking videos of themselves at gas stations saying, we got rid of your carbon tax. That's because of you. The cost, sorry, Nicholas, the cost of gasoline at the pump is 20 cents on average per liter cheaper because you guys pushed back, fought the narrative, and stopped the carbon tax outside of Quebec. Nick, did you want like a second just to like have a little bit of a sigh here? Like Quebecers are still paying the carbon tax.
Yeah, every time we mention the fact that Quebec is still paying a carbon tax, a part of me is like dying inside. So I really need to clear things up. Sadly, we were among the first province to introduce such carbon tax through a cap and trade system just after California, and now we're still stuck with it. But there's a lot of things that are changing overall in Quebec. There's more and more pressure growing. There's at least one party. Sadly, they have no seats at the National Assembly, but that might change overall by the provincial elections next year. But the pressure is mounting on the local government to finally get rid of it. Now we know that there's some discussion at the National Assembly between the people that are, or maybe some Quebec government officials that are mentioning that maybe going forward with a cut on the gas tax instead of getting rid of the carbon tax might be the way forward. So clearly they're already trying to play with the numbers or trying to play with their own policies to try to get some additional support because right now the CAQ is very unpopular. So to be very honest, they're as any other unpopular government 1 year away from the election, they're going to be playing with the numbers and try to give some tax cut, give some maybe, as we call in Quebec, some form of candies on the plate. So maybe that's going to get them reelected. But they're trying as much as possible to avoid talking about the carbon tax, which is good because we know that they're feeling the heat. But now that we're talking about a carbon tax, because there's something else that could also increase or make life less affordable for Quebecers and Canadians alike, and that's the incoming ban on gas and diesel vehicles. That is basically the new carbon tax fight that we're leading in the Taxpayers Federation. So obviously this fight is still growing. We still have one of the biggest petition lists, I think, in the whole country, with so many supporters on the tens of thousands of Canadians who have signed up, and they're sending emails to their officials, to MPs, to MNAs, to every politician around the country to tell them to back down on that policy. So for now, we know the pressure is mounting. The industry is on our side. Everyone is basically saying, no, it doesn't work. It should not go forward. But sadly, it seems that the politicians, both in Quebec and Ottawa, are not listening. But with the pressure mounting, I'm pretty sure that we're going to have some reactions very soon.
Franco, did you hear that segue that Nicholas just pulled off?
That was perfect.
That was really...
That was perfect.
That was gorgeous.
That was really good.
We wanted to transition our topic over to the ban on gasoline and diesel.
But then we got into like Eastern European grocery stores. So I didn't know how we were going to land the ship there, but good job, Nicholas. Or land the plane. I don't know.
I'm really enjoying this show from a linguistic perspective. All right, so Nicholas, to stress this, okay, so Quebec has its own little thing that it's doing. It's comparable to the national scene. But what I really wanted to highlight is that this isn't happening in some far-flung time in the future. No, this is going to start happening, at least the federal restrictions kick in next year. So we got like 5 months before the restrictions on the number of new vehicles that car dealerships must sell that are solely battery powered. Are your guys' restrictions in Quebec are also kicking in a few months, aren't they?
Yes, and they're even worse than in the federal standard itself. So by next year, the federal government is forcing car manufacturers and car dealerships to sell at least 20% of all their new cars as electric or zero emission. So that would include electric cars, hydrogen cars, or plug-in hybrids. Now, the Quebec government, they set that goal to 32.5%, to not say 33%. So 1 out of 3 new cars that will be sold in Quebec by next year will need to be either as well electric, hydrogen, plug-in hybrids, or hybrids vehicles. For some reason, the Quebec government or the Quebec jurisdiction will be the only one allowing the sale of hybrids or conventional hybrids, so the one that you don't need to plug or to be able to recharge them past 2035, which is kind of surprising that the federal government has not gone in that direction yet. But the thing is, when you look at what's going on in Ottawa right now, there's more and more pressure mounting. Not even, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the CEO of Stellantis and Ford or GM decided to meet Prime Minister Mark Carney to tell him that the goals for next year, the 20% threshold, is unreachable, it's unsustainable. And what it's going to do is that it's going to force them to reduce production, meaning that there's going to be less cars in the car dealership, meaning less options, less affordable options for families and workers. And that's going to be the direct result. But it's not just that. There's also been a report that was published by Transport Canada just after the election by some mysterious hazards. But so it was published in May. And that report was basically saying that Canadians are very, very divided on that mandate right now. Many people that are living outside of the cities think that it's going to be very hard for them to be able to drive their vehicle past 2035 because of the lack of recharge station, the lack of the fact that cars are not affordable at all, and the fact that there's probably going to be higher costs on the electricity bills that will affect families that have a higher or bigger problems in terms of, or I would say, sorry, lower income in that case. So all that being considered, it's clear that the pressure is mounting, but the big problem is the government is still going forward with it. And now we learned that there's a memo that was released, and we had this news in the National Post not so long ago, where basically, again, the government is very much aware that if they don't bring back their subsidy on purchase of vehicles, so the I think it's $5,000 that was offered to anyone that would be buying a new electric vehicles. Well, if they don't bring it back, there's no way that this goal for 20% new electric vehicles can be achieved. Right now, if you look at the first quarter of 2025, only 8.7% of the new vehicles that were sold were electric. So that tells you that the only way to bring that up, to be able to reach that 20% threshold, is really to bring up massive subsidies, which we don't have. We don't have the money for it. I think we have been through all the details about the current cost of the debt in this country, about all the taxes that taxpayers are paying. And now we're saying that we should be pushing more billions of dollars to EV subsidies and EV manufacturers to be able to reach a goal that is already set by everyone as unsustainable and unachievable. But again, the federal government is pushing forward.
Franco, a lot has been said about EV mandates, as they call it. We call it the ban on gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles, the sales of new ones, because that's exactly what the government is doing, both in Quebec across Canada. Do you think this is a winnable fight? Because it may seem grim because, Mark Carney, wrote this book where he's all about we need electric everything, and he's quite against using oil and gas all through this book. But now he's no longer the UN special envoy for a blah blah blah. He's now the Prime Minister of Canada, and he is the former Bank of Canada governor, so he knows how math works. He keeps saying out loud that he wants to be more careful with spending. Do you think that this is a winnable fight that Carney will back down on, especially now that what's happening in the States? Like, if you got a huge vehicle market, North American vehicle market demand, that is now completely dropping its so-called EV mandate, the market's going to have to do push come to shove here, right? Do you think Carney will blink on this?
I think this is a winnable fight for 2 reasons. Number one, Canadians don't support the government banning the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles. Nicholas, do you know the polling off the top of your head, some of the polling that the CTF commissioned by Leger? If you don't, just go on your phone, pull it up, and I'll just keep blabbing on about the second reason. So while Nicholas is looking for the polling numbers that we put out, like Canadians don't support this. They're not on board with it. But like the second reason why I'm optimistic, because this is nuts. This is crazy. Like, you know how much it's going to cost for all the power generation required for this, the new infrastructure, the new transmission lines, the billions of dollars in subsidies, whether that's directly to consumers or to like multinational corporations who want to build battery factories, right? Governments have already put taxpayers on the hook for tens of billions of dollars in corporate welfare to multinational corporations so they can build battery factories already. Okay, so think about the cost of the subsidies, the cost of the corporate welfare, the cost of the new transmission lines, infrastructure, power generation. Like, we're already more than $1 trillion in debt. Carney already said that he wants to ramp up military spending, right? Carney also he has already talked about all this new spending. Like, the government is broke, Canadians are tapped out, and the idea and the requirement behind banning the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles is crazy. Like, the power generations, the cost, the new infrastructure, like, no wonder politicians, I haven't heard a single politician, by the way, I haven't heard one actually be honest with Canadians and tell them how much this ban would cost.
Yeah, and they
how many billions?
Hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions with a B. And to exactly what Franco's talking about, it's not as if these poor little darlings are in the dark and they don't know. The government of Canada put out a study through natural resources. You know, all those bureaucrats whose salaries you pay we were just talking about. They sat there and they did the study, okay? It's hundreds of billions of dollars that it will cost to ban the sale of normal gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles and go to full battery-powered vehicles. We just did the quick math here at the Taxpayers Federation. If you took all of our privately owned vehicles, so forget transport, forget commercial, forget trucks, personally owned vehicles in Canada, waved a wand and magically turned them into battery-powered cars, you would need 14 new CANDU nuclear reactors. The big honkers, like at Darlington. We're not even talking about the so-called, small modular nuclear. No, the big ones that they have in southern Ontario. 14 of them. That's just for the power. That's not counting the transmission lines and all the charging stations and all the commercial vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's no wonder that the feds came up with hundreds of billions of dollars in cost. Yes. But they don't tell you about it.
So like, for those exact two reasons, right? So the second reason that I mentioned, just because just the crazy cost of actually doing this within the decade is absolutely nuts. And then the first reason I mentioned is that Canadians don't support it. Nicholas, you got those polling numbers for us? What was the poll? What did the poll show that we commissioned?
So the last poll that we commissioned goes back to April 2025, and it showed that 54% of Canadians oppose the ban. But when we just take those who had actually a clear opinion on this, it grows to 60% of all the Canadians that are against the ban on gas and diesel vehicles for 2035. So that's massive. And it shows really that this policy is very unpopular. And it's not the first time that we have such report. Like I said previously, there was that report that was commissioned by Transport Canada. So the government themselves, they know that it's unpopular. They know that Canadians are not behind it at all. They literally asked many of their focus group what they think about it, and many of them, the people that were asked what is going to be happening to them in 2035, they had a negative approach or a negative I could say expectation of what's going to happen when this ban is fully into force. So clearly Canadians don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to be forced to buy an electric vehicle by 2035. And it's not a rant against EV. It's not a rant against plug-in hybrids vehicles or whatever. It's really more about the fact that Canadians wants to be able to make a choice. They want to be able to keep that ability past 2035, and they don't want to be stuck with a bill that is going to be quite unsustainable on the long term.
So folks, join the fight. Make sure you join the fight with the Taxpayers Federation. If you head to the website, taxpayer.com, sign the petition to get rid of the ban on gas and diesel powered vehicles, the sale of the new ones, because this is going to be a huge, costly, expensive fight, and we need to win this one on behalf of everybody. Franco, did we want to get to our taxpayer pro tips?
Yes.
You go first, sir.
Well, mine's going to go out to the bureaucracy and specifically the government union bosses playing Chicken Little right now, and all their little minions in different other different think tanks. Okay, so I saw a news report come across my social media feed. Okay, and I'm just going to read it to you. Ottawa and Gatineau will, quote, bear the brunt of public service cuts, report. A new analysis finds the government could cut the equivalent of more than 24,000 full-time jobs in the National Capital Region. So Ottawa, Gatineau. So the whole point of that was to like fearmonger and be like, oh, well, if we finally shrink the cost of the bureaucracy, well, you know, the cities like Ottawa and Gatineau, they're going to be hurt, right? Their economies. Won't somebody think of the bureaucrat? And, you know, my pro tip is like, all those extra bureaucrats should have never been added in the first place. And guess what? The role of government is not to be a white collar welfare scheme. That's not why we have government. Okay? So I don't think that argument has any merit to you, because the whole point of government is to not be a white collar welfare scheme. So no, we're not buying it. Cut the bloated bureaucracy.
Outstanding taxpayer pro tip, and I like that term. Did you just coin that, or did you quote someone?
You know, I'm sure I'm quoting someone, but let's just give me credit for it.
I will. Franco Terrazzano, great coiner of phrases. That was very well done. White collar welfare scheme. That's just government. Okay, Nicholas, what is your taxpayer pro tip?
Oh, I can hardly beat that, but I would have to say that I think I've made already my rant about the whole situation on the carbon tax in Quebec. What we have seen throughout the country with our fight against the carbon tax is just happening a second time, but in a more miniature version this time, because it's happening only in one jurisdiction. But it really shows that in the end, governments are always gonna cave once there's enough pressure on them coming from every direction. It always takes some time, so that it actually happens. And right now, there's never been so much discussion about the incoming ban on gas and diesel vehicle from the provincial and the federal point of view. There's never been so much discussion about the Quebec carbon tax. Well, for the last 10 years, many people were always saying that we were not paying a carbon tax because we had another wording for that. But so it shows that eventually they cave. So all I'm going to say to all of this, or the listeners, to our tax fighters that are supporting us and that have been supporting us for a very long time. I mean, keep up the good fight, keep supporting us. And also, when we have petitions, petitions are like the first thing that will really get you into the fight itself. It's not just a petition to add your name, it's a petition to enter the fight and be the next on the front line to be sent and make sure that the politicians feel the heat. It's working all over the place. And it's working right now in Quebec. So if you live in Quebec or close, or you know anyone in Quebec and you want to help in those fights, please jump in. You're very much welcome.
Yeah, they're like sign-up sheets to join the fight. That's what they are.
Against the government.
Yeah, exactly. So I will say, and it's a fun fight. Like, we make fun of politicians for wasting your money. I'm going to do a quick plug here before my taxpayer pro tip. Franco, you did a great job on the Teddy Waste Awards. Outstanding. Franco hosts our annual Teddy Waste Awards. That's where we hand out those golden pig statues, like the one behind me. They're actual trophies, and we give them out to politicians and bureaucrats who waste your money in the most absurd and spectacular way. We do this because everybody needs a laugh, because otherwise things get dark. And second, we do this because we need to mock these people. Like, they think they're super important. They think they're like landed dukes or something and have access to your money. We need to point and laugh at them for being the pigs at the trough that they are every year. And right now, our brand new video that shows all of the fun highlights from the Teddy Waste Awards that we hosted in person in Calgary is right there on our website. You can go to taxpayer.com. It's also on YouTube, all of the interwebs video things. Definitely go watch that and share it with your friends, because it's a fun way to get them to become a tax fighter, because it looks like a rockin' good time, because it is. And
hold on, and share it on your social media, because look, I bet you know people who just love big government and think politicians can do no wrong. Well, share that video on your social media, because that's the best way to bust that myth.
Way to make friends, too, and keep your family on board, get all those invites to Thanksgiving. It's amazing. So definitely share that on your social media. Spread the word and join the fight. My taxpayer pro trip is very quick. I won't tell you another story about Eastern Bloc European sausage and all that stuff. Okay, it is very local. Alberta right now is doing a major Alberta Next panel. What that means is the premier of the province and a few other people are doing these huge town halls all across the province, okay? And they're really important because you don't get grassrootsier than that. The fact that you can sign up for free, head to one of these meetings, sign up to ask a question, and literally speak truth to power. You can hold the premier herself to account. She's fielding all sorts of questions on everything from the growing debt here in Alberta to why we need to make sure we'd never have a PST in this country, to Alberta Police Force, like you name it. There's all sorts of stuff she's being asked about. Now is your chance. Just look up, Google it, Alberta Next panel sign up. I would strongly encourage you, no matter where you are in the political spectrum, because this is about holding government to account, sign up for that. At least go watch. You don't need to go ask a question if you don't want to, but the fact that you're showing up there in numbers really matters. And that's why Alberta has things like referendums, recall legislation, even at the school board level. And it's awesome. That is accountable government. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Like Franco said, be sure to share this podcast, share this video with friends and family, especially online, because then we will all help each other stand up and be heard.